It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day my only son, Lucas, was getting married. Before we start, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Now let's dive into this story. I was ready to watch my son, standing beside his bride, with all the love and pride a mother could feel. But instead, I found myself staring at my phone in disbelief, heart pounding. The text came through just as I was about to leave for the ceremony. "Mom, don't come. Check your husband's garage. Trust me." I thought it was a joke at first. Lucas, always dramatic, always stirring up something to get my attention. But then I realized something wasn't right. Why would he send me a message like this on his wedding day? What could he possibly mean? Against every instinct telling me to forget it and get to the wedding, I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. Something was off. My stomach turned as I rushed downstairs, trying to calm myself. When I opened the door to the garage, my heart skipped a beat. There it was, a box. It was carefully placed, as if someone had been expecting me. My breath caught in my throat as I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a stack of photos, each one more gut-wrenching than the last. There were pictures of Derek, my husband, with Isabel, my daughter-in-law. They were intimate. No, they weren't just intimate. They were the kind of photos you only share in secret, hidden away from the world. I couldn't breathe as I looked through them, disbelief consuming me. But then, at the bottom of the box, there was something else, a small, sleek flash drive. Hesitantly, I plugged it into my computer. The videos that appeared were more than I could have ever imagined. There they were again, Derek and Isabel, in their own world, too close for comfort, caught in the act of betrayal. I could hardly believe my eyes. Was this real? Was I really seeing what I thought I was seeing? I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My heart pounded, and for a moment I thought I might collapse. But I held on. I couldn't break down yet. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. With trembling hands, I whispered to myself, "But before all of this, let me tell you how it all started. A year ago, my life was nothing like it is now. Back then, I was still mourning the loss of my husband, Richard. His death left a hole in me that I wasn't sure would ever be filled. We had been together for over 30 years. We had built our life together, from the house we lived in to the small family we'd created. And then, in an instant, it was all gone. I wasn't sure how to move forward. I had the money, a hefty inheritance from Richard, who had left me comfortable. But that didn't fill the emptiness inside of me. And honestly, I never thought I'd be interested in anyone else. But life has a funny way of throwing the unexpected your way when you least expect it. It was one afternoon in the park that everything changed. Derek was sitting on a bench, reading a book. He looked up when I walked past, and there was something in his gaze, a quiet kindness. He was older than me, maybe in his mid-50s, his hair tinged with silver, and a certain sadness in his eyes that mirrored my own. We started talking. He told me that he had been a widower for a few years. He had lost his wife unexpectedly, and that pain, much like mine, was something that never quite goes away. There was an understanding between us from the very beginning, something unspoken that made me feel safe, heard, and understood. Derek was gentle, patient. He didn't rush things. Our conversations were long, late into the night, and after a few weeks, I realized I was looking forward to them. I was smiling again. 6 months after that first meeting in the park, we were married. It all happened so quickly. But with Derek, it felt right. I was ready to open my heart again, to let someone in. We built a life together, and I thought that was enough. Derek, who had been the kind of man who cherished the quiet moments, made me believe in the possibility of love again. At our wedding, Lucas met Isabel for the first time. She was Derek's niece, or so he said. Isabel was in her late 20s, beautiful and poised. She had this elegance about her. Educated, polished, and so very attentive. I immediately liked her. She fit so perfectly into our lives. Not long after, Lucas and Isabel began spending more and more time together. I thought nothing of it at first. It felt natural. Isabel was young, ambitious, and full of life, and Lucas seemed to enjoy her company. I liked seeing my son happy again after his difficult breakup with his last girlfriend. Isabel was just the kind of woman I had hoped he would find. 2 months later, they were officially dating. I saw the spark between them, the way they looked at each other, and I couldn't help but smile. It felt like everything was falling into place. I thought that maybe my son had finally found the one. Then, less than a year later, Lucas proposed. Isabel said yes, and suddenly, we were planning a wedding. Lucas's wedding, the one I'd been dreaming about since the day he was born. Derek and I were both overjoyed, but I had no idea that in the blink of an eye, everything I thought I knew about my family was about to be turned upside down. What I thought was the beginning of a beautiful chapter in our lives was actually the beginning of something far darker. I was snapped out of the whirlwind of memories by the buzzing of my phone. The sudden vibration felt like a jolt to my already rattled nerves. I glanced at the screen and saw Lucas's name. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. "Mom, listen to me," Lucas said, his voice tense and urgent. "Don't come. Whatever you do, don't come to the wedding. I need you to check the garage. Trust me." The words hit me like a slap across the face. My mind was racing, trying to understand. What was going on? Why was he telling me this? Was something wrong? My body went cold, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I thought he might just be overwhelmed with the day, nervous about the wedding, but something in the tone of his voice made my blood run cold. "Lucas," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What's going on? Why won't you let me come?" His response came quickly. His words clipped and rushed. "I've suspected Isabel for months, Mom. I hired a private investigator. He confirmed everything yesterday. They're a pair of con artists. Derek and Isabel. They've been playing us this whole time." The world tilted. I barely registered his words at first. My brain was reeling, and the shock of it all left me breathless. How could this be possible? How could Derek, my husband, the man I had trusted, be involved in something so vile? And Isabel, my own daughter-in-law? I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but all I could do was stand there, frozen, trying to process what he had just said. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, feeling tears start to gather in my eyes. I can't believe this, Lucas." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You need to get out of there, Mom. I'm on my way, and I've already called the police, but you have to stay calm. Don't do anything yet. Just stay safe." I wanted to ask him a million questions, to demand to know how this all started, how he knew, why no one told me sooner, but I couldn't. I couldn't handle any more information. The weight of the betrayal was too much, and in that moment, I just wanted to escape, to run far away from it all. But as I turned to leave, a shadow in the doorway stopped me cold. It was Derek. He was standing there, his face full of surprise, but something else, something darker, was lurking behind his eyes. "What are you doing here, Helena? What's going on?" His voice was low, his tone sharper than usual. I felt a lump form in my throat. I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Not while my heart was still breaking into a million pieces. I swallowed hard, trying to push the panic away. "I was just looking for a box of old things," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't believe me. I could tell. The way he looked at me, the way his brow furrowed. He could sense something was wrong. His gaze hardened, and he took a step closer. "Helena, you don't look all right. What's really going on?" I froze. My pulse quickened. I could feel the tension building between us, like a storm about to break. Derek knew something wasn't right, and I knew I had to keep my calm, but it was slipping away. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm just fine." But inside, I wasn't fine. I was anything but. My whole world was collapsing around me, and Derek was standing right there, looking at me like everything was normal, when I knew it wasn't. The air was thick with suspicion. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out, but I couldn't let it happen yet. Not when Lucas was still on his way. Not when the police were coming. I had to buy myself some time. Derek studied me for a moment longer, and I could see the doubt flickering in his eyes. The moment was pregnant with tension. He stepped closer, then stopped, looking me up and down with a strange, unreadable expression. "What's going on, Helena?" he asked again, his voice low. I stood there, frozen, as the lies twisted in my throat. What was I supposed to say to him? That I knew everything? That I knew he was a part of something much darker? I forced myself to breathe, one step at a time. "I'm just looking for a box," I repeated, my voice trembling. "I'm fine." But Derek wasn't convinced. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the weight of the lie, the weight of the truth I was keeping from him. And I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't be long before everything came crashing down. I stood there in the garage, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself that everything would be fine, that it was all just a misunderstanding. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt the walls closing in. The truth was like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I had to get out. I turned quickly, heading back into the house. My heart was pounding as I went to the front door, but as I reached for my keys, my stomach dropped. They were gone. My car keys, the only way out of this nightmare, were nowhere to be found. I ran to my purse, frantically searching, but they weren't there either. My mind raced, panic setting in. I could feel the sweat beginning to bead on my forehead. I tried to convince myself it was just a mistake, that Derek had moved them, but deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't going anywhere. I pulled my phone from my pocket, desperate to call Lucas, but my heart sank again. No signal. I checked the screen, and the Wi-Fi icon was gone, replaced by the dreaded no service message. Someone had cut the line. I was trapped. My breath hitched as I glanced nervously toward the stairs. I had to get upstairs, get to my room, lock myself in, and figure out what to do next. If I stayed down here, I had no idea what Derek might do. With a shaky breath, I bolted up the stairs, my legs weak beneath me as I reached the bedroom. I slammed the door behind me, locking it as quickly as I could. I stumbled backward, my back pressing against the cold wood, trying to catch my breath. The silence of the house was deafening. My heart was hammering in my chest, every sound feeling like a threat. But then, I heard it. A knock on the door. "Helena, are you okay? I heard you crying." Derek's voice called softly, his tone pretending concern, but I could sense something deeper beneath it. I froze, my blood running cold. My stomach twisted as I struggled to keep my composure. I couldn't let him in. I couldn't let him see how broken I was, how terrified, but I couldn't find the words to respond, so I whispered as steady as I could manage, "I'm not feeling well, Derek. I'm fine. Please, just leave me alone." For a moment, the house was silent again. I thought maybe he'd leave. Maybe he'd let me have some time to gather my thoughts. But I was wrong. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Helena," he said, his voice a little harder now. "You're acting strange. What's going on? I need to come in. We need to talk." I could feel the pressure mounting as I pressed myself further into the door. I couldn't let him in. I couldn't face him, not with all the knowledge I had now, not knowing that he had been lying to me, betraying me, playing me for a fool. "I'm really not feeling well," I said again, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. But Derek wasn't going to back down. His voice shifted, darker now. "Helena, something's wrong. Let me in." I closed my eyes, my heart racing. He was starting to see through my lies. I had to keep it together. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of his hand on the door handle, testing it. The lock was secure, but I knew it wouldn't hold forever. Derek was relentless, and I was running out of time. I had to think. I had to get out of here. "Helena, stop hiding. Let me in," Derek pressed, his voice now taking on an edge that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You can't keep running from this." I knew he was growing frustrated, maybe even angry. His calm facade was starting to crack, and that was when I realized I was no longer just dealing with the man I had married. Derek was becoming something else, something dangerous. I could hear the anger in his voice as he began to pound on the door. "Helena, open this door!" I jumped back, startled by the force of the sound. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I could hear him outside, breathing heavily, trying to force his way in. My body screamed for me to run, to escape. But where could I go? I looked toward the window. It was too high to jump, too dangerous. But the thought of facing Derek like this, trapped in this room, I couldn't do it. I had no choice. The pounding grew louder, more insistent. "Helena!" Derek shouted, his voice now angry, demanding. "You can't hide from this forever." I took one last, desperate breath, my mind racing. And then, as the pounding continued, I knew I had to make a choice. But the question remained, what was I going to do? The pounding on the door didn't stop. Each strike sent a jolt through my already fragile state, and every time I heard Derek's voice, I could feel the panic rising in my chest. He was relentless. There was no escaping him. I glanced around the room, searching for something, anything, to help me hold the door shut. My eyes landed on a small dresser in the corner, its wood sturdy enough to slow him down for a moment. Without thinking, I shoved it toward the door, trying to wedge it between the handle and the frame. The sound of the furniture scraping across the floor echoed through the silence, and I winced, hoping it was enough to keep him from getting in. I took a step back, my chest heaving as I looked at the door. My breath was coming in short, panicked gasps, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't let him in. Not now. Not when I knew what he'd done. The pounding stopped for a moment. I thought maybe he was giving up, but then his voice came through, softer, almost too calm. "Helena, what's going on?" he asked, sounding concerned, but I could hear the edge in his tone. "Why are you acting like this? What did you find? Why are you hiding from me?" I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as his words hit me like a punch. He was starting to catch on. He knew something was wrong, but what could I say? How could I even begin to explain? The lies, the betrayal, everything that had just shattered my life in the last few hours. "Just let me in, Helena. I can explain everything," Derek continued, his voice growing more insistent, more manipulative. "I promise you, whatever you think you've found, it's not what it seems. We can fix this." I felt sick to my stomach. His words were poison, but I couldn't let them seep into my mind. Not now. I had to be stronger than that. I tried to reach for my phone, my lifeline, but the truth hit me like a slap in the face. My phone was still downstairs, somewhere in the living room, just out of reach. I cursed under my breath. I needed help, and I had no way to call for it. Desperation clawed at my throat as I pushed myself against the door, willing the dresser to hold strong. But Derek didn't stop. He wasn't going to give up so easily. "What's going on, Helena? Why are you so strange with me? What did you find?" His voice was now a mixture of frustration and something darker, something that made my skin crawl. The weight of the situation crashed over me. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to break through. My body was trembling with fear. But I pushed the panic aside and tried to think. My eyes flicked to the window. It was an option, a dangerous option, but one I had to consider. The drop was high, too high. But what choice did I have? Derek was getting more aggressive by the second. I couldn't stay locked in this room forever. I hesitated. If I went out that window, it might be the only way to escape. But what if I hurt myself? What if I couldn't make it out in time? I shook the thought from my mind. I couldn't think like that. "Helena," Derek called again, his voice growing cold. "You can't keep running from me. Let me in, and we'll talk. We can fix this. Please." His voice was almost pleading, but I could feel the threat behind it. He was no longer the man I had married. He was someone else now, someone dangerous. I took a step toward the window. I could hear him breathing outside, waiting for me to respond. He had no idea what I was about to do. But I knew I couldn't stay here. Not with him this close. Not with him trying to manipulate me with his lies. I lifted the window slowly, trying not to make a sound. My heart was pounding in my ears. The outside air felt cold against my skin, a sharp contrast to the heat of the room. I looked down. It was a long way down. Too long. Too risky. But if I didn't take this chance, I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know what Derek would do if I stayed here, alone with him. "Helena?" Derek's voice cut through the silence again, softer now, almost a whisper. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me. Don't make this harder than it has to be." His voice carried an edge of something more dangerous now, a warning that made my stomach churn. But I couldn't listen to him anymore. I couldn't afford to let him take control. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I barely had time to process my own fear before the sound of splintering wood echoed through the room. Derek was no longer just trying to force the door open. He was determined to get in. I spun around, my heart racing as the door shook violently under the force of his attempts. The dresser I'd pushed against it earlier was no match for his fury. With one final deafening crack, the door gave way, splintering down the middle. Derek's silhouette filled the doorway, and the cold, calculating look in his eyes sent a chill straight to my bones. I took a step back, panic flooding my veins. This was it. There was no escaping now. He was here, and there was no hiding from the truth anymore. Derek didn't enter right away. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. I could see the rage in his eyes, the anger boiling beneath the surface. His jaw clenched, but he still tried to play it cool. "Helena," he said softly, almost as if he were trying to coax me into something. "You don't need to do this. You're making a mistake. Just let me explain. Please." I shook my head, my hands trembling as I backed up further into the room. The chaos of the moment was too much for me to handle. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. All I could focus on was the man standing in front of me, the man I had loved, the man who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even comprehend. But then, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit here and let him manipulate me anymore. I grabbed the stack of photos from the bed, the damning evidence of his affair with Isabel. Without a word, I threw them in his face, the pictures scattering across the floor. They were sharp, undeniable truths, each one a reminder of the cruel deception that had shattered my world. Derek's eyes widened, his face contorting with disbelief as the photos hit him. He looked at them, then back at me, and I saw the shift in his demeanor. The smooth talker, the charming man I had married, was gone. In his place stood a man who was now desperate to salvage whatever was left of his lies. "It was a mistake, Helena," he said, his voice strained, desperate. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I fell in love with her, but it was an accident. I didn't plan this. You have to understand." My vision blurred with fury. "You fell in love with your niece?" I spat. "Or are you just a goddamn con artist? A piece of trash pretending to be someone you're not?" Derek's face darkened, and for a moment I saw his true colors. He wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't the man I had trusted. He was something far worse. "You don't understand, Helena," he said through gritted teeth, taking a step toward me. "I was just doing what I had to do. You never gave me the love I needed. You never gave me everything I wanted. Isabel." "Shut up," I screamed, taking a step back, the anger rising in me like a tidal wave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You ruined everything. You ruined me. You've been lying to me, to Lucas, to everyone." Derek's eyes flared with something dangerous. The facade cracked completely, and in that moment I realized there was nothing left of the man I once knew. He lunged at me. I didn't think. I acted purely on instinct. The lamp on the nightstand was the closest thing within reach. I grabbed it and swung it toward him with every ounce of strength I had. The glass shattered against his head, and he stumbled back, stunned. He hit the floor hard, his hands reaching for his head as blood began to stain his shirt. He groaned, his face twisted in pain and fury. I didn't wait for him to recover. I bolted for the door, my heart in my throat. I grabbed my phone from the dresser, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I unlocked it and dialed 911. "Send the police now. He's in the house. He's attacking me," I gasped, barely able to get the words out. I hung up quickly, my heart still racing, and ran toward the front door. The sound of Derek groaning in the background pushed me faster, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had to get out. I ran out the door, slamming it shut behind me and locking it. My hands were shaking as I turned the key in the lock. The finality of the action sinking in. I was outside. I was free. I could hear Derek shouting from inside, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. He had taken everything from me. My trust, my love, my security. And now, he was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. I stumbled down the porch steps, my legs weak and unsteady, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to keep moving. I had to get away from the nightmare that had taken over my life. The air felt thick with adrenaline as I bolted out of the house, barely pausing to catch my breath before making my way to the back door. The sound of Derek's enraged shouting echoed through the house, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I had to get out. I had to get away from him before he regained his senses and came after me. I reached the back gate, pulling it open with shaking hands, and sprinted down the alley behind the house. My car was parked a few blocks away, and I didn't waste a second as I climbed into it and slammed the door shut. My fingers fumbled as I tried to start the engine, but I finally got it going. The sound of the engine roaring to life like a signal to my body that I needed to keep moving. As I pulled away, I dialed Lucas's number. My hands were still trembling, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Mom?" His voice was tight with concern. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, trying to steady my voice. I just need you to listen to me. Lucas, Derek's lost it. I don't know what's happening anymore, but I need to see you. Please." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Lucas's voice came through again, this time with urgency. "I'm on my way to you, Mom. Stay where you are. I'm bringing Isabel with me." I felt a wave of confusion and dread wash over me. Isabel? Why would he bring Isabel? Lucas, wait, what's going on? What's happening? But the line went dead before I could get another word out. I gripped the steering wheel harder, feeling the tension in my body grow by the second. I didn't know what to expect, but I drove as fast as I could. The city blurred past me as I raced toward the parking lot Lucas had mentioned. My mind was spinning. What was going on with Isabel? Hadn't he figured out everything by now? When I finally pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Lucas's car right away. But it wasn't just Lucas standing next to it. Isabel was inside, locked in the car, her face pressed against the window, staring out at me. My pulse quickened. Something didn't feel right. I stepped out of the car, my eyes locking onto Lucas. He was standing outside the vehicle, his arms crossed over his chest, a look of frustration mixed with fear on his face. "Mom, you need to calm down," he said as I approached, his tone more serious than I'd ever heard before. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding as I looked at him, confused and desperate for answers. "Lucas," I gasped, my voice strained. "What the hell is going on? What are you doing with Isabel? You know everything, right? Why is she here? Why are you with her?" Lucas didn't meet my gaze. Instead, he glanced at Isabel in the car, then back at me. "Isabel," his voice trailed off for a second. "She didn't know. Not everything. I thought she was just as much a victim as I was, but she's not. She's been part of the plan the whole time." My stomach dropped at his words. Isabel? She had been part of it all along? I looked at her, still sitting there in the car, and the guilt in her eyes made my blood boil. She looked so broken, so helpless. But then, I realized something. She wasn't the innocent girl I thought she was. She had lied. She had betrayed us all. "She knows what Derek's been doing, Mom. She knew about everything. But she's scared too. She didn't want to be involved, but now it's too late." I could see the pain in Lucas's eyes. He was torn, struggling with the weight of the truth. But that didn't change the fact that Isabel was a part of this mess. She had been lying to us from the start. "Isabel," I said sharply, walking toward the car. I bent down to look at her through the window. Her eyes met mine, but there was no remorse there, just fear. Fear of Derek, fear of what was coming next. "Get out of the car, Isabel," I demanded. "Now." She hesitated for a moment. But then, with shaking hands, she unlocked the door and stepped out. I could see the tears in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were for me, for herself, or for all the lies she had told. Lucas stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm, trying to comfort her. But I could see that he was still trying to figure out what to believe. He wanted answers, too, just like I did. "What the hell is happening, Lucas?" I asked again, my voice strained. "Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner? Why didn't you warn me?" "I didn't know how to tell you, Mom," he confessed. "I didn't know how to tell you that Isabel was involved. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that Derek and Isabel were using us. Using me." I turned to Isabel, my face hardening as I looked at her. "And you were in on it all along. You pretended to be the sweet, innocent girl, but you were just as bad as Derek. You betrayed Lucas. You betrayed me." She flinched at my words, but she didn't deny them. Her silence spoke volumes. "Isabel, you need to tell me everything," I said, my voice steady but fierce. "Now, or I'll make sure you both go down for what you did." The silence between us felt like a lifetime, but then Isabel finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek's been planning this for years," she admitted. "We were going to take everything, the money, the trust, everything, but then I started to feel guilty. I couldn't do it anymore, but I didn't know how to get out." I turned to Lucas, my heart breaking for him. He was staring at Isabel, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "I can't believe this," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I can't believe this is happening." Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He was still reeling from everything, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. His fingers were trembling as he unlocked the screen, scrolling through the messages the private investigator had sent him. "Look at this, Mom," Lucas said, his voice quiet, almost as if he was still processing it all. He handed me the phone, the screen filled with a series of text messages and images that were too much to ignore. My stomach twisted as I began to read. The messages contained detailed reports from the private investigator he had hired. There were photos of Derek and Isabel in different states, under different names. Their faces were the same, but the names were all false. They had been moving around the country, living under assumed identities. They weren't just con artists in the traditional sense, they were professionals. This is insane, I whispered, feeling my heart sink into my stomach as I scrolled through the evidence. Derek and Isabel were using fake names everywhere they went. They'd move from state to state, find wealthy, lonely people, mostly widows or people with money, and get close to them, Lucas explained, his voice tinged with disbelief. They'd act like the perfect couple. They'd charm their way into their victims' lives, and then they'd marry them. My head was spinning. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be. But the proof was right there in front of me. Wait, I said, my voice trembling. You mean to say Derek and Isabel have been doing this for years? They've been tricking people for years? Lucas nodded, his face drawn with exhaustion. Yes, and it gets worse, Mom. In 2 cases, 2 of their victims were millionaires. After they married Derek and Isabel, both of them died accidentally, one in a car crash and the other in a supposed boating accident. The investigator dug into the records, and it looks like both deaths were staged. I stared at the phone, the words beginning to sink in. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just about Isabel and Derek's affair. They were criminals. They were murderers. And they had been living this twisted life for as long as I could imagine. They killed them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lucas nodded grimly. Yes, they used those deaths to take the victim's wealth. They'd move on to the next target, and every time, they'd leave with money. And now they've set their sights on us. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. We were their next targets. It wasn't just about the affair or the betrayal. This wasn't a simple family mess. It was a deadly game they were playing. And Lucas and I were the next players, the next victims. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. We need to go to the police. This is more than just an affair, Lucas. They've killed people. We have to stop them before they do it again. Lucas's expression hardened. He was already thinking ahead, already planning our next move. I know, Mom, but we can't go to the police yet. Derek's not stupid. If we tip him off, he'll run, and Isabel will help him. We need a plan to make sure they're both arrested. I felt my hands start to shake as I processed everything. The weight of the situation was so much heavier than I could have ever imagined. We weren't just dealing with a cheating husband and a deceitful daughter-in-law. We were dealing with 2 dangerous criminals, 2 people who had been lying, manipulating, and even killing for years. They had planned everything. Their whole lives were a lie. But what do we do, Lucas? I asked, my voice breaking. What can we possibly do? They've been doing this for so long. How do we stop them? He took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he formulated his thoughts. We have to get them before they get us. We need to keep them in the dark while we gather more evidence. We'll turn the tables on them, but we can't do this alone. We need help. We need the police, but we have to be careful. If Derek and Isabel think we're onto them, they'll run. We can't let that happen. I nodded slowly, trying to wrap my head around everything. The danger was real, and it was closer than I ever imagined. They had been playing us all along. And now Lucas and I were at the center of their twisted game. We need to move fast, Lucas said, his voice firm. I'll talk to the investigator again. We'll get everything we can on them, and then we'll go to the police. But we have to be smart about it. They've done this before. They're not stupid. The weight of the situation bore down on me. But there was something else too. A flicker of something inside me. A resolve. I had lost so much already. My trust, my peace of mind, my family. But I wasn't going to lose everything without a fight. We'll do this together, I said, my voice steady. We'll make sure they pay for everything they've done, and we'll make sure no one else gets hurt. Lucas looked at me, a small, determined smile flickering at the corner of his lips. We will. We'll stop them, Mom. I promise. The parking lot was eerily quiet, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut through. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood next to Lucas, watching Isabel from a distance, trapped inside the car. The weight of everything, betrayal, lies, and death, hung heavy over us. I didn't know what Derek would do next, but I could feel that things were about to escalate, that we were on the edge of something dangerous. Suddenly, the sound of screeching tires broke the silence. Derek appeared, his car blocking the road, his expression twisted in pure fury. As he got out of the vehicle, my breath caught in my throat. In his hand was a gun, and it was aimed straight at us. "What do you think you're doing, huh?" Derek shouted, his voice filled with rage. "You think you can trap me? Destroy my life like this?" I froze. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, but I knew it was too late. Lucas, standing beside me, moved fast. His body positioned itself between me and Derek, a silent promise of protection. I could see the resolve in his eyes, even though his face was pale with fear. "You're not getting away with this, Derek," Lucas said, his voice sharp. "The police are on their way. You're done." Derek's face twisted into a sick smile, a sneer that made my stomach churn. "The police?" he scoffed, waving the gun dismissively. "They won't make it in time. You're too late." And just as he spoke, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. My heart leapt in my chest. The police were finally here. But even that wasn't enough to stop Derek. He turned his eyes back to us, a look of desperation flashing across his face. In an instant, everything erupted. The crack of gunfire shattered the stillness, and I flinched as the first shot rang out. I could hear the officers shouting, the chaos taking over the once quiet parking lot. The sound of gunshots was now drowning out everything else. Derek fired again, his aim wild, and the police responded in kind. The air was thick with tension, and all I could do was hold on to Lucas, my breath catching in my throat. I could barely keep my eyes open, the noise and the chaos too much to process. Suddenly there was a shout, and I saw Isabel, still inside the car, her hands pressed against the glass. Before I could even think, I watched as the officers surrounded the car and quickly pulled her out. They slapped the handcuffs on her with swift precision, and I could see the panic in her eyes. This was it. It was over for her. But the danger wasn't over for us. Derek, realizing he'd lost control, turned on his heels and dashed back to his car. I watched, helpless, as he slid behind the wheel, his hands shaking with anger, and started the engine. He wasn't going to give up that easily. He was still trying to escape. "Mom, we need to stay down," Lucas yelled, pulling me to the side as I watched Derek's car race toward the exit of the parking lot. But it was too late. Derek was gone. He was speeding away, and I could only watch, helpless and shaking, as he disappeared into the night. The police had secured Isabel, but Derek was out there, still free, still a threat. My heart sank as the realization hit me hard. I could hardly process what had just happened. My mind was spinning, my body still locked in fight-or-flight mode. The police were moving in, securing the area, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Lucas," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. "What now? What do we do?" He turned to me, his face grim but determined. "We keep going. We can't stop until Derek is caught. We can't stop until it's over." But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The car ride felt endless, and with each passing second, the weight of what we'd just experienced seemed to press down harder. Isabel was in the hands of the police now, but Derek was still out there, free, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. I glanced at Lucas, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Do you think he's gone?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. Lucas didn't answer right away. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "He's still out there, Mom. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." I swallowed hard, trying to process his words. My mind raced. The entire day had been nothing but chaos, and now Derek had slipped through our fingers. He was still out there, still a threat, and I couldn't imagine what lengths he would go to for one last, desperate escape. "He's going to try to destroy us, Lucas. He's already done so much. He'll stop at nothing," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Lucas's grip on the wheel tightened even further, but he didn't take his eyes off the road. "But he won't get away with it. Mom, not this time. He's not going to destroy us. Not now." His words gave me a small sense of hope, but the fear still gnawed at my insides. Derek was dangerous, cunning, and ruthless, and we were the only ones standing in his way now. But would it be enough? As we pulled up to the house, a sense of relief washed over me. The police were already there, surrounding the property, making sure no one could get in or out without their knowledge. At least we had some semblance of safety for now. The officers were setting up a perimeter, their radios crackling with static, their movements quick and precise. They knew the gravity of the situation. I let out a shaky breath, grateful for the small bit of security. But as we stepped out of the car, I felt an unsettling sense of unease. The house, my once safe haven, now felt like a prison. It was almost too quiet, too still. "Do you feel that?" I asked Lucas, my voice thick with anxiety. "It doesn't feel right." "Does it?" He shook his head, his eyes scanning the area as if he too could feel the unease creeping in. "No, something's off. Derek, he's not here." A chill ran down my spine. We were supposed to be safe. The police had secured the perimeter, but something didn't add up. Derek had been here just hours ago. Angry, desperate, ready to do anything. And now, nothing. No sign of him. It was almost like he had vanished into thin air. The officers began to search the house, their flashlights sweeping through the rooms as they checked every corner, every closet. My heart hammered in my chest as they moved through the house, calling out to each other. But there was nothing. No sign of Derek. No trace of him at all. One of the officers came up to us, his face grim. "There's no sign of him, ma'am. No evidence that he's been here recently. He's not in the house. We've checked everything." I felt a wave of panic rise in me. Where could he be? Where had he gone? "He must have fled," the officer continued. "He's hiding somewhere. He knows we're onto him. He's just waiting for the right moment to strike." That was exactly what I feared. Derek was a predator. He'd been planning this for too long, and now he was waiting, biding his time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to finish what he started. I turned to Lucas, my eyes searching his face for any trace of comfort, but I could see it in his eyes. He was just as unsettled as I was. The uncertainty was heavy. "Where is he, Mom?" Lucas asked quietly, his voice shaking. "Where could he be hiding?" I shook my head. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know where Derek was, and the thought of him lurking somewhere, just out of reach, terrified me. He could be anywhere. He could be planning his next move, waiting for us to let our guard down. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker. Every room I passed in the house seemed to grow colder, every shadow more ominous. Derek had been here, and now he was gone. But the fear of what he might do next clung to me like a suffocating fog. The silence was deafening. The officers continued to search the property, but they weren't finding anything. Nothing that could tell us where Derek was hiding. The sense of dread continued to settle deeper into my bones. "He's out there, Mom," Lucas said, his voice tense. "He's out there, and he's not going to stop until he's finished what he started. We need to be ready for anything." I nodded, my stomach twisting. He was right. Derek was out there, and I knew that whatever came next, we needed to be ready. But the uncertainty was unbearable. Where was he? What was he planning? And how much longer would it be before he came for us again? The silence in the house was suffocating. We had checked every room, every closet, but still, Derek was nowhere to be found. I stood there, my nerves stretched thin, my pulse quickening with every second that passed. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown. It was the unbearable feeling of him still being out there, somewhere, lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, it happened. A door slammed shut from upstairs, its force echoing through the house like a gunshot. I froze. "No, no, it can't be," I whispered, my heart racing, each beat loud in my ears. My body went cold as the terrifying possibility became a reality. "He's here," I whispered, almost too afraid to speak the words aloud. Lucas turned to me, his face pale. "Stay calm, Mom. We need to check the house." We moved quickly, instinctively, toward the source of the sound. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, but my feet were already carrying me forward. We crept toward the living room, our eyes darting around, trying to make sense of the stillness. The air felt thick with tension as we entered the room, and then, my breath caught in my throat. There he was, standing in front of us, tall and terrifying, with that cruel smile spread across his face. Derek. I couldn't believe it. After everything we had been through, he was still here, still free. "Thought you could stop me, huh?" Derek's voice was low, dangerous. "Thought you could trap me in my own game? Think again." He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the walls, and then, before I could react, he lunged toward Lucas. A quick movement, too fast for me to stop. He struck, and Lucas crumpled to the floor, a sharp gasp escaping his lips. "Lucas!" I screamed, my voice full of panic and fear. I rushed to his side, but before I could reach him, Derek shoved me back with such force that I stumbled, almost losing my balance. His eyes were wild, filled with rage and something darker. He was no longer the man I had married. This was something else, something completely unrecognizable. "You think you can escape me, Helena?" He spat, his voice filled with venom. "You and your son are nothing. You're nothing, and I'm going to make sure you pay for this." I tried to get up, but the room was spinning. The fear was too much. I couldn't just stand there and watch my son suffer. Not again. With everything I had left, I ran toward the door, my legs shaking with each step. I couldn't stop him, but maybe, just maybe, I could get help. "Derek's here," I screamed, my voice cracking with desperation. "He's attacking us! Get in here!" I barely registered the sound of the police officers running down the hallway, their heavy boots pounding on the floor as they rushed into the living room. Derek, realizing that his plan was crumbling, turned on them, wild-eyed, his hand gripping the gun tighter. The officers moved swiftly, strategically. They were professionals. It was over. Derek's wild, erratic behavior was no match for their training. Within moments, they had him on the floor, his gun skidding across the room as he struggled beneath the weight of their bodies. "You're not getting away this time." "Derek," one of the officers said firmly, his voice cold. "This ends now." Derek's fury only intensified. He writhed beneath the officers, his eyes filled with rage. "You think this is over?" he yelled, his voice hoarse. "You'll never be safe. I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you pay for everything." This isn't the end. But it was. It was the end for him. The officers cuffed him quickly, dragging him to his feet, still struggling, still shouting threats. "You'll never escape," the officer repeated, dragging Derek out of the house and into the waiting police car. I stood there, still trying to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who had torn apart my family was finally being taken away. He was no longer a threat. He was no longer a danger. But the relief came slowly, like a tide that was afraid to come in fully. "Mom, it's over," Lucas whispered, his voice weak but filled with relief. He was sitting up now, wiping the blood from his lip where Derek had struck him. "He's gone. He can't hurt us anymore." I felt my legs give out beneath me, and I collapsed onto the couch, my hands shaking. It was over. But was it really? The damage had been done. Derek had taken so much from us. Our trust, our peace, our safety. I didn't know if I'd ever feel whole again. I turned to Lucas, my eyes searching his face, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. The police were still here. Derek was gone. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin to rebuild what he had destroyed. "Now we can start over." "Lucas," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Now we can find our peace." He nodded, but I could see the pain in his eyes. The fear still lingered, like a shadow we couldn't shake off. It would take time. It would take healing. But with Derek behind bars, we had a chance to heal, a chance to rebuild. As the sound of sirens faded into the distance and the night finally began to settle, I couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in a long time, we were going to be okay. It was the end of one chapter, but it was the beginning of a new one, a chapter where we would finally be free. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.